I'm going to take you straight to the House of Commons, where David Davis has given an update on the discussions that took place yesterday evening regarding Brexit.
Giving British citizens in the EU and EU 27 citizens in the UK the greatest possible legal certainty about the future. Now, in future, our legal orders will be distinct and different. Last week, we explored the ways in which we will make sure the rights we agree now will be enforced in a fair and equivalent way. We also explored ways in which we can fully implement the Withdrawal Treaty into UK law. That will give confidence to European citizens living in the UK that they'll be able to directly enforce their rights as set out in the agreement in UK courts. The two sides also discussed ways of ensuring consistent interpretation of our agreement. Now, although we've not yet arrived at a single model that will achieve this, we have explored a number of options. And we should also not lose sight of the fact that we've made significant progress in this area since June. We've reached agreement on the criteria for residence rights, the right to work and own a business, social security rights, rights for current family members, reciprocal healthcare rights, the rights of frontier workers, and the fact that the process for securing settled status in the UK will be streamlined and low cost. But of course, there are still some issues outstanding for both sides, including the right to continue to enjoy the recognition of professional qualifications, the right to vote in local elections, the right to onward movement as a UK citizen already resident in the EU 27, the right to return, the right to bring in future family members, and the right to export a range of benefits. Now, in many of these areas, it's a straightforward statement of fact that our proposals go further and provide more certainty than those of the Commission. We're trying to find, on both sides, I think, pragmatic solutions. And in the fourth round, we offered the guaranteed right of return for settled citizens in the UK in exchange for onward movement rights for British citizens currently living in the European Union. And we look forward to hearing the Commission's response on this offer. We haven't had it yet. Mr. Speaker, I recognise there has been some concern regarding the new system which European citizens will have to use to gain settled status in the United Kingdom. So last week I confirmed that while there will be a registration process, the administration process will be completely new, streamlined and importantly low cost. Furthermore, any EU citizen in the UK already in possession of a permanent residence card will be able to exchange it for settled status in a simple way. They'll not need to go through the full application process again. The tests associated with this process will be agreed and set out within the withdrawal agreement. As a result of our productive discussions, the Commission is also able to offer similar guarantees in return for those British citizens in the European Union. These clarifications on both sides have helped build further confidence. Now, this round also saw further detailed discussions on Northern Ireland and Ireland. In a significant step forward, we've developed joint principles on a continuation of the common travel area and associated rights. These joint principles will fully preserve the rights of UK and Irish nationals to live, work and study across these islands. They'll also protect the associated rights to public services and social security. To provide legal certainty, these principles recognise that the withdrawal agreement should formally acknowledge that the UK and Ireland will continue to be able to uphold and develop these bilateral arrangements. Our teams have also mapped out areas of cooperation that function on a north-south basis, and we have begun the detailed work to ensure this continues once the United Kingdom has left the European Union. We've also agreed a set of critical guiding principles to protect the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions, and we're working on the necessary steps to make this a reality. And throughout this process, we have reaffirmed our commitment to the rights of the people of Northern Ireland to choose to be British or Irish or both as they choose. I've set out before our shared determination to tackle the unique circumstances of Northern Ireland by focusing on creative solutions, and we've begun to do so. But we cannot fully resolve these issues without also addressing our future relationship. As the Prime Minister said in a statement to this House last week, we owe it to the people of Northern Ireland, and indeed to everyone on the island of Ireland, to get this right. On the financial settlement, the discussions continued in the spirit fostered by the Prime Minister's significant statements in her Florence speech. The Prime Minister reassured our European partners they will not need to pay more or receive less over the remainder of the current budget plan as a result of our decision to leave. And she reiterated that the UK will honour commitments we have made during the period of our membership. Off the back of this, the September round we agreed to undertake a rigorous examination of the technical detail where we needed to reach a shared view. Now, this work has continued. It's not been a process of agreeing specific commitments. We've been clear that this can only come later, but it is an important step so that when the time comes, we'll be able to reach a political agreement. Finally, on separation issues, we've continued to work through the detail on a range of issues, particularly those areas relating purely to our withdrawal, such as nuclear safeguards, civil judicial cooperation, and privileges and immunities. Whilst we make good progress, we believe that the remaining issues in this sector are dependent on discussions in our future partnership. So we are ready and well prepared to start those discussions. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, our aim remains to provide as much certainty as possible to businesses and citizens on both sides. I've made no secret of the fact that to fully provide that certainty, we must be able to talk about the future. We all have to recognise that we're reaching the limits of what we can achieve without consideration of the future relationship. The Prime Minister's speech in Florence set out the scale of our ambition for the new partnership with the European Union, and she also laid out the case for a simple, clear and time-limited period of implementation on current terms. At the European Council later this week, I hope the leaders of the 27 will recognise the progress made and provide Michel Barnier with a mandate to build on the momentum and spirit of cooperation we now have. Doing so will allow us to best achieve our joint objectives and move towards a deal that works for both the UK and the European Union. Mr. Speaker, there has been much discussion of what will constitute sufficient progress. Let me be clear that sufficient progress and the sequencing of negotiation has always been a European Union construct, not a UK one. Negotiations require both parties to not just engage constructively, but also to develop their positions in advance. For the UK's part, I've always been clear we'll be conducting these negotiations in a constructive and responsible way. We have been entirely reasonable in that. The work of our teams and the substantial progress we've made over the recent months proves that we're doing just that, and we're ready to move these negotiations on. I commend the statement to the House.
Keir Starmer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for sight of his statement. Mr. Speaker, nobody should underestimate the seriousness of the situation that we find ourselves in. At the first hurdle, the government has failed to hit a very important target. That leaves EU citizens in the UK and UK citizens in Europe in a continued state of uncertainty. It means insufficient progress in relation to Northern Ireland, and it appears the deadlock on the financial settlement is such that both sides are barely talking. The Secretary of State in his statement says that he is confident that we are now on the right track. I can't fault him for his confidence in his own negotiating ambitions. The problem is, most of those ambitions have failed to materialise. One of them was that the sequencing of talks would be the row of the summer and that he would not agree. He then did so by coffee time on day one. And the suggestion in his statement that sequencing and the concept of sufficient progress are EU constructs leaves out of account the fact that he agreed to them and signed up to them. Exactly right. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State were right to go to Brussels last night. I'd obviously like to claim that it was a response to a letter that I wrote to the Secretary of State last Thursday, but even I recognise that would probably be over-claiming on the letter. But because of the seriousness of the situation, both sides, and I include the EU, need to do whatever they can to break the impasse by Friday. More flexibility is needed on both sides by Friday. I hear obviously what the Secretary of State says about the Florence speech, and it was an important speech, but he would be on stronger ground if what the Prime Minister had said in Florence had not been immediately undermined by the self-interested antics of some of his cabinet members. I also hear what he says about the statement of intent last night to accelerate the process. Given the glacial speed so far, that's not exactly a high ambition. If a car is moving at 2 miles an hour and goes up to 4 miles an hour, that's acceleration, but it's still going slowly. If we want investment in our economy to continue, if we want businesses to stay here and others to come, we need to start talking about transitional arrangements now. And those transitional arrangements need to be on the same basic terms as now, i.e. in the single market and within a customs union. Every passing week without progress on transitional arrangements makes things worse for businesses, not better. We need to make progress this week and before December. We also need to drop the nonsense about no deal. Only fantasists and fanatics talk up no deal. No deal is not good for the UK. No deal is not good for the EU. And I know it's not what the Secretary of State wants, but he must now realise that the slow progress of these talks raises the risk of no deal. So the critical question for the Secretary of State today that we need to have answered from that dispatch box is, what does he intend to do between now and Friday to deliver on the commitment to accelerate the talks? What words does he want to hear on Friday to evidence that progress? How confident is he on a scale of 1 to 10 that he'll hear those words? And what's he intend to do if he fails? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, as ever, we get carping from the right honourable gentleman and not a single proposal or suggestion. Indeed, it's very interesting that he doesn't actually have another strategy, and we have a measure of that, because he started out by criticising that citizens' rights is not resolved now, where on Sunday he said, I also accept and I agree with David Davis when he says you can't simply separate out the issues we're dealing with now and the later issues. A quote direct from the right honourable gentleman. He talks about Northern Ireland in the same terms. To be fair to him, David Davis, he's right on issues like Northern Ireland. There's only so far you can get before we move to the next phase. So very different when he has to appear reasonable on Peston, but appeal to his backbenches here. The simple truth is that there has been an extremely productive activity in these negotiating rounds. Mr. Barnier is going to the Council on Friday. He will present his case. The case he will present will be one which I hope argues for more progress both on transition and on future relationship. But it's for him to make that persuasive case on the day. I know for a start from my own visits around Europe, and I think he will know the same, that a large number of the 27 member states want to do the same. Now, he talks about talking up no deal. I cannot think of a time, a day, a moment when I have talked up no deal. What I have done, time and again, and there's a reason for that, because we are in the middle of a negotiation and we want to do that in good order and with good faith on both sides. But what I will say is this: if we do not prepare for all outcomes, we leave ourselves exposed to an impossible negotiation. And we saw that again this weekend. We saw it when he and his fellow Shadow Chancellor said, oh, we'll pay in perpetuity for access to the single market. We'll pay whatever it takes, 100 billion, 200 billion, whatever it takes. The simple truth of the matter is the right honourable gentleman carps and carps, but he has no options of his own.
Sir William Cash. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So the Brexit Secretary there, David Davis, updating the Commons on the meeting that was held last night.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.